Stay with us until the end, where we'll uncover how to reclaim control over your personal information and put an end to the silent profiteering of companies exploiting your data. The air trembles with the resonance of chants, a rhythmic harmony of voices that rise and fall like a living wave. Their fervor softens as King Quechua approaches, his presence commanding reverence. Before him stand 20,000 warriors, their forms a vivid tapestry of strength and tradition. Some are adorned with ostrich feathers that flutter with their every breath, while others are draped in jaguar pelts, their primal patterns a tribute to untamed power. Shields glint under the sun, and iron-tipped spears gleam with the promise of defiance. The king halts, his gaze sweeping over his people. His voice, steady and imbued with unyielding resolve, cuts through the murmurs. End quote. I have not crossed the seas to seek out the white man. End quote. He begins his tone, both a lament and a challenge. End quote. Yet they have come into my lands, unbidden and unwelcomed. They take what is ours, our wives, our cattle, our crops, our very earth beneath our feet. They now set their eyes on me. End quote. He pauses, letting his words settle like stones into the hearts of his warriors. End quote. What shall I do? End quote. He asks, his voice rising, the weight of destiny shared with those who stand before him. The warriors respond not with words, but with the thunderous beat of their shields against the earth, a singular pulse of defiance. It is not merely a question of what the king will do, but what they, together, will become. The clans of the Zulu kingdom rise to their king and Apos' call, their voices echoing across the valley in a symphony of loyalty and defiance. They are not here for ceremony alone. Those sacred herbs burn in ritualistic plumes, their smoke curling toward the heavens as if seeking ancestral blessing. This gathering is not one of quiet reverence, but of war, its purpose etched into every line of their painted faces and the sharp edges of their iron-tipped spears. Red columns have crossed the borders of Zulu lands, their presence a deliberate trespass. Some 5,000 British troops march under the crimson banners of empire, augmented by African allies in their service. At their head is the 2nd Baron Chelmsford, whose reputation as a seasoned commander belies the audacity of his campaign. From the center column, Chelmsford has repelled Zulu warriors at the edges of their own territory, an act of arrogance and provocation. His troops came upon a Zulu royal homestead, a quiet cluster of huts encircling a grazing pasture, the heart of a dignitary's life and labor. Without hesitation, the British set it ablaze, and the flames licked the sky, devouring not just thatched roofs, but the essence of a people's pride. As smoke billowed and filled the valley, it seemed to mark the British advance, a dark herald of destruction. With the burning valley at their backs, the soldiers pressed deeper into Zulu country, their movements deliberate and unrelenting. The reasons offered for this invasion are thin veils of justification, even by the imperial standards of the British Empire. A flimsy dispute over borders and treaties has become an excuse for conquest, the hunger for domination disguised as duty. But here, on this scorched land, under the relentless African sun, the Zulu warriors gather, not merely to defend their homes, but to uphold the spirit of the kingdom. The drums of war grow louder, a counter-rhythm to the march of the empire, promising a reckoning that neither side can yet foresee. Having brutally colonized diamond-rich land, claimed by Africans and Dutch-speaking Boer settlers, the colonial British now border the mighty Zulu kingdom. Virtually every able-bodied man within Zululand can be mobilized by the king for war, and each has been trained from boyhood in the art of combat. The High Commissioner for Southern Africa, Sir Henry Bartle Frere, has cobbled together a series of isolated border incidents into a casus belli against King Quechua, despite the latter and Apos' vigorous insistence on avoiding war. Even as Frere and Apos' superiors excoriate him for apparent warmongering. This is a chance to strengthen regional British authority, to win glory, and to demolish the largest block of indigenous power in Africa. Chelmsford has eagerly undertaken Sir Frere and Apos' quest, Riding the Zulus must be thoroughly crushed to make them believe in our superiority. 249, I shall show them how hopelessly inferior they are to us in fighting power. The force Chelmsford is hunting. The great Zulu army now passes through undulating valleys and golden hills, lands once host to manifold clans. It was the great King Shaka in the early 19th century who armed the fledgling Zulu people with iron-tipped spears and developed the horns of the bull battle tactic to encircle, defeat, and subjugate the warring clans. Zulu tradition holds the country was greatly disturbed by refugees, but some remained behind with their heads bowed low, finding it hard to abandon their homes. They who lacked courage fled. Shaka thus founded the Zulu kingdom, a united network of powerful clans who pledge fealty to the divine king, and several times per year send their men to fight on his behalf. Theirs is a land enchanted by the potent spirits of ancestors, whose favor must be curried by rituals, bravery, and discipline. Through the bare-handed slaying of a bull, Kachuo and Apos, warriors have summoned the powers of these ancestral shades, and their souls have been ritually purified, their minds fixed on war. The British camp stirs early in the morning of January 22nd. A few hundred Zulus have been spotted some miles off, perhaps the vanguard of the larger Zulu force. Neglecting to construct defensive works at the camp, Chelmsford gathers half of his troops and rides out to hunt them. But further north on the same morning, a small scouting mission finds a handful of Zulu warriors herding cattle. They give chase, clamber to the summit of a hill, and stop, struck by the fateful sight spread miles across the valley. 25,000 Zulu warriors come to defend their kingdom. The valley shifts and roars, and the nearest clans charge after the British. Quechua and Apos, brilliant general, Mchingweo, reigns in the warriors and strategizes with his officers. Chelmsford has left fewer than 2,000 troops at Isinloana. There, the British camp watches the Zulu tide pour onto the plain, echoing with stirring war chants and the rattle of spears against shields. Thousands of Zulus, meanwhile, stealthily proceed to the flanks of the thin British firing lines. These are the horns of the bull, the tactic honed since the days of King Shaka. British fire first stalls the advance, cutting down many. Once close enough, the Zulus hail spears and fire outdated guns into the British lines, and then charge. Berserking over heaps of fallen comrades, the relentless Zulus plunge their hand spears into British chests and stomachs. The British fall back to camp, scramble for ammunition, but Zulus charge the holes in their ranks and swarm the firing line from all sides. The sky dims under a solar eclipse. Wretched stragglers pull into makeshift squares and flail their bayonets. Zulus beat them with shields and drive spears through their torsos. One officer, Charles Pope, raises a revolver and fires at his Zulu commander. The shot grazes his neck. Another hits his leg. The Zulu throws his spear. Pope staggers into the grass, pulling at the skewer in his own chest, but the Zulu forces it back in and kills him. Some British flee toward a river as Zulus chase them on the rocky banks. All those captured or wounded are killed. The Zulus do not take prisoners. After the final shots of resistance are spent, 1,300 of the invading forces lie dead. The victorious Zulus ritually remove their clothes and disembowel them so as to allow the souls of the dead officers, infantry, and drummer boys to escape through the stomach, lest the Zulus be haunted by a trapped spirit. Night brings fog over the hills. Chelmsford makes his tepid return to Isinloana with his troops. The shrewd offensive of the Zulus has exposed the imperious folly of Chelmsford and left the grass wet with the entrails of Englishmen. One captain recalled stumbling over the naked, gashed, and ghastly bodies of our late comrades. Although the stout resistance of a small band of British soldiers at Rorkanapos, Drift, and Isanloano itself inflicted a great loss on the Zulus. Their ranks remained strong and furious. Zulus ambush a British caravan on the Intum River and proceed to devastate a British force at Lobane. They track enemy forces to the camp at Cambula. In a show of defensive discipline, the British unleash a violent torrent of firepower on the charging Zulus. The death count is fewer than 30 British and up to 2,000 Zulus. The war has heretofore been the result of insubordinate scheming on the part of Frere, but now gruesome war stories reach the British public and statesmen and properly animate the broader British Empire to exact revenge. A second invasion is mobilized in late May, and now a foreign force of 25,000 roams Zululand. King Cetshwayo continues as always to ask for peace, but the initial demands of Frere remain unchanged. Most notably, the dismantling of the Zulu military system and the admittance of British colonial officials into the kingdom, terms tantamount to the abdication of the Zulu throne, the disintegration of indigenous autonomy. Chelmsford thus rejects Cetshwayo and Apos' attempts at ceasefire and diplomacy. Disgraced by the defeat at Isamawina, Lord Chelmsford learns that he will be replaced by a man called Sir Garnet Wolseley in a matter of weeks. He will have to restore his reputation before then, defying orders to stay in place. Chelmsford ravages the countryside, driving inhabitants and cattle from their modest homesteads. It had been cattle that provided the pastoralist Zulus with much of their food, furnished men with status and the means to pay dowries to acquire multiple wives. Women, meanwhile, fulfilled child-rearing duties and supplemented food supply with small-scale agriculture. Now emerging hazily ahead is the greatest herd in the most sprawling homestead of all, Ondini or Ulundi, the capital of the Zulu kingdom in the House of Cetshwayo. Chelmsford rallies his 5,000 troops. Cavalry roam the edges of the battlefield, and the infantry forms a large square. Over 10,000 Zulus emerge from the swaying grass for a final stand. The horns of the bull encircle the British and then rush inward, met this time with the thunder of cannons and the tearing of the Gatling gun and the ceaseless rifle fire. No Zulu comes within 30 yards. The British shoot to death many of the wounded in retreat. Smokestacks and hissing flames overtake the valley as the Royal